You have never been to the Woodbridge campus. Welcome, and please come back again soon. And Northern Virginia Community College serves the Northern Virginia region, Prince William County being the furthest south, all the way up to Washington, D.C. And my brag is that Prince William County is the only county in the Northern Virginia service area that has two comprehensive campuses, the Woodbridge campus and the Manassas campus. We tend to think of Fairfax as being the 8,000-pound gorilla in Northern Virginia, but they don't have two comprehensive campuses, only Prince William County. So that makes Prince William County the 8,000-pound gorilla when it comes to community college access. So yeah. Well, thank you all for being here and for this very important topic on education, infrastructure, technology, and more. And I think as we all know, the educational system, especially the public school system, is critical to the economic development of any region. You know, businesses tend to look first at the quality of their educational system when they decide to locate, and the quality of the education system, or the lack of the quality, can also be a good reason why businesses relocate. So we're very fortunate to be in a county that has an outstanding public school education, and you'll hear more about how that happens and what is done to make it the quality educational system it is. As far as logistics, we'll open up with, I'll do an introduction to each of the panelists. After the introduction, they'll have 5 minutes to make remarks, and then once all of the panelists have given their remarks, then we'll open it up for questions. Okay? And the folks in the front row, you guys get A's. We can see the bad students, they're sitting in the back. This is, some habits don't change. Pardon me?
I think your wife is back there.
No.
Lily.
Ooh, you made me nervous. Well, let me start by introducing our first panelist, Lily Jessie. Lily is a former teacher and administrator in Prince William County Public Schools. Retired in 2010, in the 2010 school year after a 35-year career, 20 of which was served as principal of Vaughan Elementary. The governor recently appointed her to the SOL Innovation Committee. Mrs. Jessie is a nationally recognized author, mentor, master teacher, an innovative administrator in the educational field. During her tenure with Prince William Public Schools, she served as supervisor of the Title I reading program, a diagnostician, a reading teacher, assistant principal, and principal. Mrs. Jessie has provided award-winning leadership throughout her career. She was one of 17 principals in the metropolitan area to receive the Washington Post Distinguished Leadership Award in 1997. She was also named Principal of the Year for Prince William County Public Schools. She was named Supervisor of the Year. The Title I program under her supervision was cited as one of the best in the state of Virginia. Prince William County Schools named a wing in her honor in 2009. She is a contributing author to the Collaborative Teacher and the Collaborative Administrator, and recently published an anthology in the book It's About Time, entitled It's the Principle of the Thing. She is an education writer for the Old Bridge Observer. She is the author of the nationally recognized Martin Luther King Oracle, held Monday, January 19th at the Hilton Memorial Arts Center at 11 a.m. You are all invited to attend. Mrs. Jessie, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hill. First of all, I have to say that I have visited your campus a couple of times and brought people, because when we look at infrastructure, if you visit some of the rooms in this building, I think that you'll see, as we're looking at 21st century learning, that that's what we're really looking at. There are collaborative areas, lots of digital types of activities taking place in this building, and places for people to do engage in all those collaborative conversations that we're going to talk about. First of all, I want to just say that I was principal at Vaughn, and tonight I'm just going to try to give a perspective as a principal of an elementary school, because I think that infrastructure and class size at the high schools and middle are totally different from what happens at the elementary school. I just want to hit three topics: what we already know, and what we also know, and also the third topic has been what we need to know. We already know that the per pupil allocation for Prince William County Public Schools is $10,365, which is the lowest of the 10 schools in what's called the Waby Report. The average salary is $61,525, and it looks like our salaries are not as competitive, but when you look at maximum salaries, we're fairly competitive. I've asked my daughter to pass out the revenue sharing information. I think people find that very interesting, and my husband. When you look at how we rank in relationship to other counties, Arlington County, for example, receives a great deal more money. There's if you look at that sheet, you're going to see that our revenue split is 45.1 to 49.1, where when you look at Arlington, there's a great deal more money. Class size at elementary is 23.2. Middle, on the other hand, is 35.1. And it is the highest of those 10 schools. But in spite of this, we still have the best graduation rate. We have a graduation rate of about 90%. We have a lot of students who are entering in post-secondary education, compared to Alexandria, who pays a great deal more money, but is considered one of the lowest performing school districts in the state of Virginia. And also, but on the other hand, when we look at SAT scores, the total SAT score for Prince William County is 1,500, where in some of the other counties where there's more money spent, there's not as a higher level of performance. What that says to me is that in spite of the low per pupil expenditure and in spite of the class size issues, we are still doing well, because we've got wonderful teachers who work to make sure everything goes well in the class. I also have we're passing out what I know as a principal. And I think I want to defend principals tonight, because sometimes I hear teachers say that we have a huge class size, and why doesn't the principal do more? And I've come to the conclusion that he doesn't do more, or she doesn't do more, because it's really an infrastructure. It's not a class size issue that we have. We have an overcrowding issue. If you look at the sheet that my daughter has passed out, you'll see that David Klein, who is, I call him the genius of Prince William County Schools, when I was a principal, I received money based on how many students. So if I received too many students, I had the money. The problem was I had money, but I had no place to put the students. And so when we look at a school like, in one particular school I want to talk about, that is Potomac View. Now, the Board of Supervisors rezoned, and they're going to build a new apartment building over there. But Potomac View has 8 teachers with 30 kids in a classroom, and there are 2 teachers because they don't have the physical space. I've done that before. It just doesn't work. So it looks like we have a small teacher-pupil ratio, but in fact, we do not. And so we really need to think about what are we doing in terms of receiving money and receiving enough to take care of the infrastructure needs that we have. I know that we're building classrooms. I think it's something like I know David can give more information on this, but we built eight new schools with 13 additions in the last 5 years. So we're building schools. We just don't have the money, we just don't have the physical plant to take care of the students that we have in our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jessie. Our next panelist is David Klein. Mr. Klein was appointed Associate Superintendent for Finance and Support Services in July 2008. He began his career with Prince William County Public Schools in 1989 as Director of Financial Services, supervising the offices of Budget, Accounts Payable, Accounts Receivable, Audit, Payroll, Student Activity Funds, Purchasing, Warehouse, Inventory, Courier, and Mail Services. What else is there to do?
Transportation, facilities, risk management.
And you have that now. During his tenure, the school division has received the Meritorious Budget Award from the Association of School Business Officials International, ASBO. Every year since 1998 for the school division's annual budget documents. In 2002, Mr. Klein initiated the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for Prince William County Schools, which has been recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association and by ASBO with the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for each succeeding year. In 1996, he was awarded the Pinnacle Award for Outstanding Achievement in the school business management profession, again by ASBO. Mr. Klein graduated with honors from the United States Coast Guard Academy and earned a master's degree in business administration, finance, and investments from George Washington University. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Good evening. Just as you said, a couple brief remarks. First of all, to the extent that we're dealing in school infrastructure, to start that, it's really about students and student enrollment. So the reality for us is certainly that every time you get 25 students, we need a teacher, and certainly we're in a position that we've got to provide some form of classroom to accommodate our students. On average, over the probably the last 10 years, we've gotten about 2,000 students a year. What that translates into is that when we do that, that really means that with 2,000 students a year, we end up with spending about $65 million in order to accommodate new construction. New construction being elementary, middle, and high school as good examples. An elementary school these days runs about $28 million, a middle school $56 million, a high school $112 million, and in addition you need 20 acres of land for an elementary school, 40 acres of land for a middle school, and 80 acres of land for a high school. And if anybody knows of an 80-acre site on the east end of the county, we're still looking for high school sites for the 14th high school. And certainly it requires all of the associated support staff with it. Again, from the student perspective, in addition to space needs for simply what I call general instruction, there are additional needs depending upon specialized services that can result from special education, English language services, remedial services, etc. In trying to address the space, there's various categories of this, everything again from acquiring site, constructing new schools, putting additions on buildings, constructing related facilities, doing renewals or renovations of buildings. We attempt to use a building for anywhere from 75 to 100 years, and about every 20 to 25 years you've got to do a major renovation of that, meaning you've got to do the interiors, you've got to replace the HVAC equipment, you've got to replace the roof. Basically, you've got to take it and put it in, turn it around so you can have it in service for another 25 years. At the same time, there's typically major maintenance projects going on. We also have 200 portable learning cottages, aka trailers, which is an indication of how far our construction program still needs to go. because that really translates to the fact that we still have about 4,000 students every single day out of our 87,000 students who are residing within trailers on a daily basis. We also have elements then of, we've got to manage our energy infrastructure, trying to make sure we're efficient and effective and make good use of our energy and cost resources. And finally, in addition to really the core building structure, we've got to accommodate the technology that's associated with providing instruction. 10 years ago, we might have a $300 TV in the corner of the room and a computer on the teacher's desk. Now that TV is a $3,000 interactive whiteboard, which is dramatically providing a different and more effective means of instruction. It's something from an infrastructure point, though, you've got to be able to put it in place, you've got to be able to support it with an electrical system, you've got to meet the needs of technology system like wireless networks and all. As we go forward for the next 5 years, we're projecting growth of about 6,850 students additional. We're looking at 8 additional school facilities, 3 elementaries, a middle school, and 2 high schools, as well as 2 replacement schools. 81 classroom additions, and combined, we'd be looking at spending for facilities, additions, and renewals in the next 5 years about $700 million. That's how dramatic it is. And to go and touch again on technology, what are the kinds of things that are there? Certainly, we've got to do things simply from converting from old PBX systems to voice over internet protocol, making sure our internet or wireless internet in each of the buildings is up to task as we go through things with bring your own device, additional things where you're putting, ideally at some point we're probably going to end up with a device in the hands of every student. Well, it's not a matter of just putting the device there. You've got to have the network infrastructure to support it, the servers, interactive projectors, etc. And certainly as we go forward, we've got to look at new and different ideas that, can we address housing students, and how is that impacted in the future by things such as virtual high schools, online courses, ideas in which we might conceivably serve more students at a building, but not have all of the students in that building at the same time. Thank you.
10 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Our next panelist is Dr. Michael Wooten. Dr. Wooten is the chairman of the Northern Virginia Community College Board. Hey, hey, hey. Additionally, in 2012, he was appointed to the Prince William County School Board as the Occoquan District's interim member. Dr. Wooten works as a professor of contract management at Defense Acquisition University, where he teaches applied statistics and cost analysis techniques to professional adult learners employed as contract specialists. He holds a master's degree from Norwich University, the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, and George Washington University. He received his doctorates in education from the University of Pennsylvania. And this is not on his bio, but Dr. Wooten is also a community college graduate from Georgia. Dr. Wooten.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hill, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to address the viewership of Prince William County's Committee 100, as well as the members of the committee here personally tonight. I'd like to make my remarks follow those of Mr. Klein. He left off not with a package of statistics about the tough problems that we have, and those problems are indeed tough, but he introduced the idea that we need to be creative in thinking about solutions, different ways of dealing with the problem of being able to deliver that world-class education to our students that we promise in our motto here at Prince William County, that we will deliver world-class education. On that note, here in Prince William County, our neighbors are Fairfax, Loudoun, Arlington County, and Montgomery County. I call those 4 out because those 4 are delivering graduation rates north of 92%. Let me correct that. College-going rates north of 92%. We're not quite there. Our college-going rates here in Prince William County are quite respectable. But the point I want to make is this. We say we are world-class. Our neighbors are delivering world-class results. And in this neighborhood, if we're not world-class, we're being outclassed. So the issue of facilities, what we're going to talk about here tonight, is one that we have to address because facilities compete for the budget priorities that we need to be thinking about here in Prince William County to be able to get that equation right so that we have those world-class college-going rates. One of the things Ms. Jessie alluded to was the way we deal with people, with our teachers, and our teachers' salaries compete in those budget priorities with facilities. We have to be careful that we're not going property broke here in Prince William County trying to build the facilities that we must have or that we believe we must have in order to educate our children properly. I'd like to talk about a couple of ways of thinking differently about the notion of housing students. So one I call the 3+1 model. In essence, that's early graduation. My son did that. Or I should say our son. My wife is here in the audience tonight. 3 years of high school, you require, or you can collect 7 credits per year, and that's 21 credits. To graduate from Prince William County schools, you need 22 credits. Some children come into high school with a credit or more from middle school. You can graduate in 3 years. If 1/3 of high school seniors decided to do that, that's a high school. That saves us a high school. But if a smaller percentage decide to do that, then that is, if a smaller percentage decide to graduate early, then that can significantly dampen the pressure on building new facilities. We can also have early college, which is a variation of that approach, where a student could finish high school requirements and then move on to an institution like our NOVA here, but still be on the rolls so that they can be competitive for the most competitive schools in the state. And actually, my youngest sister did that in Georgia. Lastly, I want to bring up the issue of things related to, I'm going to use the V word here, vouchers. Not that I'm trying to press those, and not as an ideological solution, but as a way of finding idle capacity in other places that may have classroom space, other places, but still allowing us to deliver the free and appropriate education of choice for Prince William County's families. So I invite you all to ask probing questions. I hope the panel here will apply their genius, as Ms. Jessie's called out, but seriously, the experience and some creativity to addressing the problems of facilities tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. And we have the complete spectrum of education represented on our panel. And our last panelist is Jeanette Chapman. And Jeanette is with George Mason University, where she serves as a research associate in the School of Public Policy for the Center for Regional Analysis. And Jeanette is going to share, she's going to tell us about ourselves, some demographics and who we are.
I'm going to be very brief, and I have a regional background mostly, but it has ramifications for Prince William and the school districts. The job growth that we've been seeing in the past couple years looks different than what we've seen in the past sort of decade, and I think everyone in this room knows that. The federal spending is changing, it's flat or it's declining, the federal jobs are changing, the high wage growth that just sort of came to the region without any real effort, it's not really going to happen like that for the next few years, and that's putting the pinch on both household budgets and county budgets. And so just to be that voice it's not necessarily going to free up any time within the near term. And the long-term forecasts have things changing, that the private sector will fill the gap a little bit, but that will take work. So it won't necessarily happen overnight. And that has ramifications for the schools. And also the type of jobs that are coming to this region and the type of jobs that are coming to the nation have different training needs. And high schools are, and middle schools and elementary schools are responding to that, particularly with the tech elements and the STEM, things along those lines. But not necessarily everyone needs a college degree anymore as well, and that was true 10 years ago. But there are different growth rates projected for the 2-year certifications, the things that the community colleges can provide, that also have good paying jobs that are sustainable for young graduates from high schools. And so Prince William, though, has had a tremendous population growth over the past 20 years, as has most of the region, and that has translated into this increase in the number of school children, and that's really not going to stop anytime soon, mainly because this region still does have good jobs, and it is still a large region. But what's changing is that the type of children that are here look a little bit different than they did, even to their older age cohorts. Compared to 2000, a fewer percentage of children are in households with those middle income ranges, which is really in Prince William County. And that's not actually that different than the region. The middle income wage bracket here has sort of fallen off. The jobs aren't really growing as much as they used to be. So there are more children in households earning under $50,000, and there are more children in households who have incomes of more than $150,000. And so that's different, and those demographics have different needs. They're also somewhat more, the younger children, the under 10s, are more likely to be in a household where it's not just English being spoken than the older than 11s. And that's sort of a current demographic change. And those children also have slightly different needs. And it's not just Spanish that's being spoken in those households, it's other languages as well. So it's a different type of diversity. And that also is accompanied by some race and ethnic changes from the younger children versus the older children. Younger children are slightly more likely to be Hispanic, whereas older children are more likely to be white non-Hispanic. And then lastly, I just want to throw this out there in that as the children in the household age, it's more likely that both parents or all parents, if it's a single parent household, are in the workforce. And as it stands right now, the children who are 0 to 4s, 60% of their parents, or 60% of those households, all of the parents work. And so that's just something to throw out there in perhaps consideration of their other discussion points. And I'm going to leave it at that. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Chapman, and thank you to all the panelists. Now we have, it's time for audience participation with questions. And let me see if I can get the ball rolling by asking the first question. And this one might be directed more to you, Mr. Klein. The Prince William County Public Schools has repeatedly stated that they are playing catch-up with the construction of schools. Prince William has added Battlefield and Patriot High Schools. It's still a peak or overflow level. We have generally kept up with elementary and middle school constructions. If you consider that we have schools sufficient to meet the student load needs. However, many of these students are being taught out of 121 trailers at the elementary schools, 22 at the middle schools, and 37 at the high schools. What is being done to create more permanent and better equipped facilities that will get our kids out of the trailers?
Well, I think as a general response, the first part is that I think we're behind probably in high school, middle school, and elementary space, if only by the fact it's evidence that we have trailers at every one of those levels. That kind of drives where we're sitting at. In the longer-term solution, as we do a capital improvements program each year, as we're moving forward in this particular the next 5-year period. Certainly what I described looks at, we're looking at a growth of about 6,800 students, and in that time frame, we're looking to add capacity of about 10,000 students. So one would hope within that time frame that we're doing a little bit of catch-up, assuming we're moving forward with that construction schedule. Some of the problems we've seen with that in the past is, again, it goes back somewhat to what happens with enrollment. The last couple of years, enrollment has slowed down. We had enrollment growth of about 2.5% for a number of years. The last several years, that growth is at about 1.5%. In a lot of ways, that's a very good thing. We're still growing, but fortunately, we're not growing as fast. That means that certainly, potentially, we have the opportunity to see if we can address some of that. The reality for schools and school construction, more than anything, comes down to money. I mean, the indication, if you want to replace 200 trailers, it's a mix of middle school, elementary, and high school space, and you can replace it for somewhere between $150 and $200 million. Somebody would have to do the math for me on what that translates to the county tax rate, but certainly there'd have to be a desire or a political will to put that kind of money into, let's do a massive construction project to catch up. That's assuming, again, that you could find enough appropriate sites and land to put those schools.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists like to?
I'd like to add. And in terms of solutions, I think it's a very difficult situation, but I mentioned Potomac View for a reason, because Potomac View has all of these situations in terms of space, trailers, and classrooms where there are 2 teachers in a classroom. At K3, there are 2 teachers at every level, according to the most recent report. And yet, we're building an apartment building. We continue to build in places where we know there's no space. And that just does not make sense to me. I'm very new to this board. And I did go to the Board of Supervisors and say, look, what are we doing here? Why would we put another apartment building in a place where this place is severely overcrowded? And I will tell you, when you're dealing with little first graders and you put 2 teachers in a room, I went by a room and there were 2 teachers in the room, and they just said, Miss Jessie, we don't like it. We don't like working 2 teachers in a room with 25, 30 first graders. I was also concerned about the emergency situations. When I looked at all the desks, 30 desks in a room, if we had a fire, I started to worry about what would happen with that. As we build new schools, I've always been an advocate of looking at new structures and new ways of building, and with keeping in mind that we have to have a better utilization of space. As I know David is going to be looking at new schools, and some members of the board have said it doesn't matter what a school looks like. Yes, it does, because there are schools now that are utilizing hall space much differently, so we could have more students in that building. There are students that are using libraries differently. No computer lab, where you've got the technology and the infrastructure there. As you're building that building, you're thinking about better utilization of space. And I think for looking at acreage, we're really, instead of going horizontally, we're going to have to think about going up. It is what it is. And maybe, and I know they won't quote me in a newspaper for saying this, but I'm sure they will. But it's interesting today, I was watching the football games, and I thought the first thing we always build is a football field. And I began to notice that all the football fields have names. And there's so much money, I'm told, in Prince William County. I think we really need to look at partnerships, and we're doing that with advertising, I think, now at Central. But I think we're going to ask for outside help, because I don't see them increasing the tax rate for us, because there are so many people, military like my husband and me, who really don't have children in schools, and they don't want their taxes raised. So we really have a dilemma.
Dr. Wooten?
Thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, I'd like to weigh in just a bit here. During my remarks, I did suggest that there are some alternatives that need to be considered. Looking at time usage a little bit differently, and with high schoolers, again, being able to increase the throughput can relieve some of the pressure on high school overcrowding. It doesn't solve the middle school or elementary school overcrowding, but it can relieve pressure in the high schools. And I'd like to encourage both the professional staff and the board from Prince William County to address those. And also, I admit that I was stirring the pot a little bit when I mentioned vouchers, but related to that, I think perhaps a more palatable approach might be partnerships with schools that would sign up to contracts that would accept students in the way that the Prince William County schools would like, the appropriate mix of ethnic and economic diversity. And if a school would accept some students and sign up to provisions that Prince William County schools thought acceptable, and if they had idle capacity, that might present a win-win and provide suitable space for our students, and also not increase the tax pressure, because as you correctly pointed out, people here who've lived in the community for decades and whose children have graduated successfully and moved on aren't looking for upward tax pressure. And if you recall the details that these two have brought out, a slight nudge in taxes won't solve the problem. So we need some really creative solutions. And again, I'd like to encourage some responses to that so we can have more of a problem-solving discussion as opposed to those old just debates, a dialogue.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Just hold on a second, we're going to get it in the microphone.
Oh, yes.
We're going to take this one and then switch.
Okay,
If-
we're good.
If you would, before you ask your question, if you would introduce yourself and tell us what district you're from.
Oh, turn the switch. Okay. It says it's on. Is it on? Yes, it's on. It is. Hi, I'm Jane Touche from the Occoquan District. We had a year-round school when my kids were in elementary school at Rockledge. We loved it. So I'm interested in hearing what you think about the prospect of year-round school.
Wow. Well, I wish you hadn't asked that question. I worked in year-round schools. And Dale City, when we had cars down 95, and we did 4515, and we did color codes, and we had a rainbow classroom where you had all the colors in the rainbow. And it took a while for parents to really get used to that particular idea. There are some schools throughout the United States that are going year-round because it does save money. And there's some indication, as you know, for every month a child is out of school, they lose about 1 month of growth in terms of their reading skills, that they're out too long. I think something like that would require quite a bit of getting the community used to that concept. I do think that we need to look at other structures. I have met with several churches, especially to talk about use of their facilities for preschool. As you know, we have just inherited some preschool money, and finally, we're going to get some preschool money. We're not doing well in that particular category because it requires matching funds. We didn't accept the money because we had to match the money. The money that's coming from the state this time does not have to be matched. So that's going to be another physical plant issue. And I think David could probably answer this better than I can. We use high schools for some of the preschool programs and for the Head Start programs. But there are churches and facilities that are being considered. The other possibility is that there are school systems that have problems with facility use, and they are renting out structures in buildings, vacated buildings, where maybe they have a fifth grade classroom in one building, and you do K-3, and that they use other facilities. So there are several possible ways to look at it. Year-round, I think that would require quite a bit of, I saw the young lady in the back said, please no, and I think the initial reaction may be, please no. The kids really liked it because the parents said they could go skiing when they wanted to, they could take vacations at different times. Maybe people would say we'd rather pay higher taxes. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, Jane, how that would feel in the community. David, do you have a thought about it?
I think there's a couple other elements that tie into it, because certainly when we look at it, most of the people who have gone to some form of a year-round school process have really, and Prince William County as well, have really done to accommodate a relatively short time frame that says, we are behind, we are going to sort of band together, we are going to adopt year-round schools for a period of time, essentially to allow our building program to catch up. So if you want to go to it's really a change in mindset to say you want to go to it permanently. There are a few school divisions out there that do it, but not many. A lot of it is also sort of the societal part of, we have sort of a defined school calendar, good, bad, or indifferent, but that's what people follow and that's what they're used to. It really does take sort of a societal acceptance that you're going to go to something different. And then since this also deals with infrastructure, there's other elements that tie in. Right now, the summertime is when we get our major maintenance done in buildings. We do school renewals. Areas that do year-round schools generally have to start, in order to keep up over a long period of time, have to build other facilities to handle what's going to happen when I need to do a major renewal, what's going to happen when I do major construction. I won't say in a sense, I think Baltimore County at one time had something where essentially they had a spare school. It was never empty. The reality was you bust people over there while you were fixing their school. Yeah. And then the other component even for energy is right now while we cool buildings in the summer, most of those buildings are cooled at we're trying to keep mold from forming, et cetera, but we're not cooling them so that the building can stay occupied through the whole time. There's some additional costs for that. Again, I think it really, as much as anything, comes back to what does Prince William County want in their schools, and what kind of organizational and societal change do we want, whether it's year-round schools or following a traditional model.
I have a question here with the mic.
Hi, I'm Evie Green, and I'm from the Coles District. I also thank you, Ms. Jessie, for mentioning the business school partnerships. I, in my professional life, work part-time for SPARK, which is the Prince William County Education Foundation. And I am in charge of finding businesses who would like to advertise on our school web pages. So anyone in the room who's interested, you can find me after the meeting. Personally, I am a product of Prince William County Schools. I started at Washington Reed Elementary School and graduated from Osborne Park High School. However, in second grade, I experienced 45-15 year-round school. As my mom will describe it, I could have skipped second grade and probably been better off. Not only were we in year-round school, but also in a trailer. So it just, what I remember is basically the teachers talking about, we were there long enough to introduce a new subject, would go away for a couple of weeks, forget that, come back, have to review before starting on more material. So as a parent now of 4 students in the school system, we have 1 at Benton Middle School and 3 at Coles Elementary, I would love to do anything to prevent year-round schools. And
Your question?
I would ask, my question, just to follow up with the year-round schools, my husband is a school teacher in Prince William County. Please also understand that school teachers usually supplement their income in the summer with other jobs. So that's just something else to consider. Then there's the question of how does that affect the sports teams as far as in competition. My question specifically was probably everyone pointed at me, so I felt like I had to say something since I had said no. Mr. Klein, I have heard a lot of comments with regard to the management of our school district, since we are so large and diverse. Is it ever going to work where, for example, with weather, would it be easier to have Western, Central, Eastern as designations for our school district, or does that cause more problems than solutions?
It makes for a good question. We've had some discussion and looked at it probably a couple of different times. In the reality, probably, of the weather, it tends to split more down the middle of the county through Manassas, that it's not unusual. But 2 days ago, yes, there was snow in Dumfries and down the 95 corridor, and there was nothing out in Bull Run Mountain. Now, that's the reverse of the usual, in which we're buried out on the western end, and you may have little or nothing on the eastern end. But the problem is that increasingly today, the entire county is I'm going to say, integrated and interactive. Teachers work on one end of the county and their kids go to school on another end of the county. We run specialty programs in which students, again, transit from one side of the county to the other side of the county to participate in various programs. Once you get into various testing issues and testing requirements, again, it becomes more important to try and keep people on essentially on similar schedules. So yes, we have looked at it. There's a better example is Loudon looked at it very seriously because theirs is even more dramatic. They have sort of a urban suburban eastern half and a very rural western half, and it did not work for them. They looked and said, this just doesn't work, and particularly if you get at a place where, depending on the year, you can have one half of the county theoretically a week or 10 days scheduled different than one on the other side of the county. It gets to be messy. In the context, if I can follow up on the other question, the other issue we would have to look at on year-round schools that's valid is also the issue of testing. When year-round schools took place, pretty much all of that testing was driven, probably 90% of it was really driven by the county itself. Now the vast majority of that testing comes from the outside. So where the state has SOL testing in May, it does make a difference what your timing is and when you started, and which of the cycles you're in would be impacted in the sense of how much instruction one student would have, potentially significantly more instruction prior to getting to that test period as opposed to one that didn't. And likewise, SATs now are pretty well, your dates there are pretty well locked in. And what you have for like AP exams and things like that are also within fairly fixed periods that if we change our calendar around, somehow we would have to also figure out how to ensure some degree of equity that all students would have a similar amount of instructional time getting up to it. It's not to say it can't be worked out or gone through, it's just another issue to consider.
I just wanted to add another concept that is prominent. It's called a school within a school, especially at the high school level. This particular concept where when you have large numbers of students, one of the things that happens when you've got 2,400 students in a building, you really don't get to know the students. I remember my daughter saying that she hadn't met the principal, and I thought, how could you have not met the principal? Because at the high school level, you know that they'll say you have A through F, one principal has this group and another one has this group. The school within a school concept basically allows you to have a traditional school, and those students would be in that particular part of the building, and they have their principal, and then you would have a technology school, and those kids who want to go to a technology school, and then you would also have just various career opportunity schools. Technology, like I said, the concept of allowing kids to have more personalized relationships with people.
If you would identify yourself and your district.
Bill Golden, Neabsco District. Question for the, really for the region. Economic growth trends between now and 2020, what do they really mean for student growth and infrastructure and the tax base? It's not a matter of even maintaining or increasing the tax base. Isn't there a good chance that we will see the tax base in many cases shrink at the individual level, even though overall taxes may grow up due to population growth?
Yeah, no, that's a large question that I will try to address. So over the next 10 years or so, we expect that job growth will pick back up again. However, what we saw in the past couple of years is that a lot of the job growth in the region was driven by domestic or international migration, not necessarily a natural increase. Now, within the jurisdictions, that's a little bit different. In Prince William, I think it's about, at least 2012, 2013, is about 60% was from natural increase, so that's births minus deaths. And that also is changing somewhat as people are living longer, which is great. But that changes those numbers somewhat as well. But as to the tax base, the migration in some ways increases the overall demand for housing and increases its value in some ways, which gets to the residential base, which here is a very large share. Actually, in the region, it's second only to, I think, Charles County in terms of how much of the tax base is residential versus commercial. And as you know, that's a different animal. The commercial tax base here is 17%, give or take, and that's pretty low. And until the job growth picks back up, it's going to be really difficult to grow that share because it's not necessarily a core business corridor yet. And if job growth had continued to expand out in the core pretty quickly, that may be a different discussion. But right now, that's almost off the table, at least for another couple of years. And so I'm walked around that question a little bit. I'm not sure if.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
I mean, a question here.
If I may, I wanted to address that a bit because there is a clear connection between the commercial tax base and the issue of schools and facilities. We need to make sure that we have world-class schools. That's what draws in the kind of businesses that we need here in Prince William County to help expand that commercial tax base. If we don't do that, then we could put at risk that small sliver, that 17% of the tax base that is commercial. Right now in Prince William County, we're sort of the bedroom community. We live here and commute to the jobs elsewhere. We sit in between Fort Belvoir to our north and Quantico to our south, and instead of competing for those jobs, we're ideally situated. We're sending those jobs to Fairfax County, and now Stafford is starting to outperform us. And I think one of the things that we need to do in a larger discussion is talk about why Prince William County is an attractive place for businesses, and I believe that schools and school performance is a central part of that. And I want to make sure that we brought that into the center of the issue.
Let me, if you would.
Al Alborn from the Coles District, and a question for Mr. Klein. I'm sure you know that the Board of County Supervisors just issued guidance to county staff to drop the residential tax rate from the 4%, I believe, which was the original rate for the 5-year plan, to index it to CPI, which is currently 1.3%. I assume you have people already scrambling to re-wicker your budget to present something at the new guidance, and I'm wondering if you can share with us what kind of compromises or how it's impacting the things you've all just talked about in terms of facilities.
Well, in a general sense, first, yes, the change was to decrease from a 4% increase in the average tax bill to 1.3%. As it turns out, that reduced for Prince William schools. Instead of getting about a $24 million increase for next year in funding operations, it's about $12 million. We are currently going through the process of developing the superintendent's proposed budget, which comes out on February 4th. Again, without going into detail at this point, But it is an issue that we certainly have to always face, and that is, how do you trade off and balance the physical needs of your facilities, the compensation for your employees, and then certainly just simplistic, I won't say simplistically, but things such as programs and services. That rate of growth is really not keeping up with all of those factors involved. Certainly, overall, I would say there's probably an element that says you almost need to get at least something along the lines of CPI plus growth is probably a closer measure to keeping up to keeping where you are, but even that doesn't really provide funding in the sense that you want to provide better instruction or that your costs necessarily go up at a higher rate than standard CPI.
Thank you. Next question?
No? Yes? Okay, Harry Wiggins, Occoquan Magisterial District. You know, the fact is that the Board of Supervisors have starved the schools for the last 10 years. The development that
Don't forget your question.
there's a question here. The Board of Supervisors have approved developments that have added roughly 21,000 additional students to the school board, or the schools, in 10 years. The school board has been building schools and opening schools at a prodigious rate. 17 schools, as I think, in the last 9 or 10 years. Unfortunately, those schools only hold about 12,000 students, which is why we have about 225 trailers sitting out there, and why we have 35 students in middle school per class. The school board needs to take on the Board of Supervisors. I note that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have the lowest local contribution to schools of any county in Northern Virginia. The lowest contribution. So what that tells me is the Board of Supervisors don't value
Give him 20
education.
minutes.
So what I'd like to hear from Ms. Jessie is the willingness to take on the Board of Supervisors. Because I think the school board's been remiss in the past in being willing to confront the Board of Supervisors on the mess that board has created.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harry Wiggins. I appreciate you calling my name. I did go before the Board of Supervisors. In fact, Lori Williams and I went before the Board of Supervisors when they were in the Occoquan District, in fact. This apartment building was being built, and I made it known then what my thoughts were. David, when they are rezoning, a letter comes from us saying, don't do that. And they say, thank you for the letter, and they move on. So it's, I think what we're really looking at, what we don't want to talk about, is we're talking politics. It's political. This is a political year. A bunch of things are going to happen. I've never been known not to take on a fight. And I have no problem with going before the Board of Supervisors, and I have. In fact, I talked to the chairman and said I would be speaking before the Board of Supervisors, and I don't know if Lori and I are the first ones to do that, but making my point known, I have done so, and I have had Board of Supervisors members meet me in a social gathering and say, what's up with you? You know, you're not playing like the good little girl. Well, I've never been known to be a person. I want to get things done. But at the same time, I know that my one voice will not do it. You know whose voice is going to do it? People who vote for these people. David, he showed me the letters. He's been writing letters. You write a letter?
Yeah.
Right.
Certainly, at least in the last 5 years, every single rezoning that's come before the school board, they have replied to the Planning Commission that on the basis of overcrowding schools that we are opposed to approving that rezoning, and I would say with one exception. Currently, the Stonehaven one that is in front of the Board of Supervisors, the school board did not oppose it per se. However, they did not endorse it. Essentially, they said, we will acquiesce to this one, not because we believe this one is any better. We still have problems with growth, but simply because the proffers that are coming in on that site and our desperate need for another high school and a high school site mean that, okay, we'll have to buy into this one. But the school board has consistently said, we're opposing rezoning because, in that sense, because we continue to grow in residential units and we can't keep up in the sense of the number of schools we're building.
Thank you.
I'd like to weigh in briefly if I can. A minute, half a minute, it won't take me long. 20 seconds, okay. Well, I want to start by saying I applaud Ms. Jessie for engaging the Board of County Supervisors with respect to that apartment building. Constructive engagement, though, is what's going to get the Board of County Supervisors to act. And if we're not able to get them to move, then our engagement isn't that effective. And I think we have to step back and look at the optics. When the school board supports the building of one of the most expensive high schools ever in the state, it really undercuts the school board's legs in going to the county and saying our funding is inadequate. And I think candidly we have to accept that those are the optics that we create. We have to start first by being good stewards of the taxpayers' funds, and then though you do have the wind at your back. You have lots of parents that say education is a priority, and as I laid out earlier, businesses won't come here if we don't have world-class schools. But we do have to be candid, step back, look at the optics, and ask ourselves what our budget priorities are.
Thank you. Question?
Hi, I'm Brianna Altman. I live in the Occoquan district, and my question is for all of you. It's regarding revenue share. Do you hate it, like it, love it, and why?
It's a good question. Having been here since 1989, then certainly I think there's advantages and disadvantages to the revenue sharing agreement. Certainly the advantages that are stated are, in general, it has fostered a better working relationship between the school board and the Board of County Supervisors in the sense of maintaining an overall political environment and, in some cases, even the reputation of Prince William County. It means people are talking and trying to work together. It helps define certain parameters around which your budget is working. At the same time, it also sometimes ties your hands. Okay, we have a defined amount. We work within that defined amount as per agreement, and it makes it very difficult to come out and make an expression of, oh, but we really need more. But if you look, for example, at Fairfax, and that's one that's commonly used, they will take a budget, they will get a number from the county, they will ask for $75 to $100 million more. In the press, they will sort of negotiate their way down to a number. But at the same time, the practical reality in Fairfax also is, if you go back after the fact, generally they get about the same percentage every year too. No, it's not defined. Maybe there's a little more flexibility year to year, but even there, they're still getting about that same percentage as you go through the years. Again, as much as anything, it's not so much about the revenue sharing agreement, about what is it that the community wants their schools and county to be, and how much you're willing to pay for it.
I don't want to do a great deal of discussion about the revenue sharing part of it, but I think, Mr. Wooten, when we talk about the schools, it would be one thing if all of this happened because of the last school. There's been a history of the Board of Supervisors building or allowing rezoning practices to take place without thinking about the impact on schools. I think the first thing that has to happen is, can we add additional students in these areas when we have a school like Potomac View with trailers and 2 teachers in a classroom? To me, it's just such a common sense type of situation. But I think the other part of that is that we want to grow as a county. So we want to bring in industry. But when you bring in industry, you're bringing in more students. You know, I was at Vaughn, and they were coming and going all the time. I came into Vaughn where they said, you absolutely do not have a cafeteria. And I said, oh, that could never be. And they said, oh, yes, you don't have a cafeteria. And I didn't. So we've grown a great deal, and we've changed a lot. But we've just all got to be on the same page. And I think everybody in the room knows it's all about politics. It's really about politics.
I would be glad to address the question on revenue sharing. I agree with it. It's the way that Mr. Klein laid out the arrangement to the north of us with Fairfax County. As you said, they tend to settle in on a specific number anyway. Now, that being said, it is fair for Prince William County Schools to go to the Board of County Supervisors and say, we agreed on a specific share at a specific point in time, but due to your development practices, you have shifted the burden by your pattern of development. With high-density housing, for example, you bringing in a larger proportion of children, and therefore schools need more money, and because of your action, the schools have to accept it, as she's pointed out correctly. Schools have to accept the county's building patterns, and they have to manage that burden. So again, I think it's fair for the schools to go back to the Board of County Supervisors and say, you need to reconsider the revenue sharing arrangement that we have agreed to. But again, and I wasn't picking or eye-poking, but it does tend to undercut the school board's legs if, even though there may have been a history of overbuilding, and that is a true statement, but when your most recent actions suggest that the taxpayers' dollars aren't being stewarded as well as they might be, then that, again, it undercuts your position in going to the Board of County Supervisors saying we need to renegotiate. The board will say, why? You've overspent. You spent X percentage of money on development that wasn't necessary. And I think that that money should have been looked at for different priorities like teacher pay.
We're going to take two more questions. Two more questions.
I'm Clancy McQuigg from the Occoquan District. I like Ms. Jessie's idea of schools within schools, and I would like to ask Dr. Hill if we could maybe put some Northern Virginia Community College schools within the schools, because we can, stuff community college people into trailers. They don't have to be in the fancy building. But
That's that question, though. We got two more. Take them. No. Your question?
could we, in fact, consider, if we're going to do schools within schools, and I like that idea, okay, could we consider moving some of the Northern Virginia Community College classrooms to the high schools so we could get more kids through the junior college? And the advantage of that is, of course, they tend to graduate in 3 years instead of 4 years, so we get them out of the school system altogether. And that means it would be a joint venture between you and Miss Jessie's school system.
You know, I think your question was answered earlier by Dr. Wooten, the early graduation, the twist you're adding, college classes. Yes, we can do that. That is happening. It needs to happen more.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Two more questions.
Tom Fitzpatrick, Occoquan District. Appreciate everyone being here today. So much of what you hear in the discussion about schools and other requirements is the search for a world-class solution. But I've never heard what a world-class solution is. And I think what we need is a Prince William solution. And I think what we need is a district-by-district solution, because I live in the Occoquan district, and it's entirely different than the western part of the county. I understand the messy aspects of trying to blend it, like you said, and as since we have somebody that's actually in the schools and has some practical experience on the dais, it has to work ultimately. But in order for a solution to work, it's unrealistic when you're talking about hundreds of millions and billions of dollars over years to not have a concrete goal, and instead having what is really, pardon me, pandering for a world-class solution as opposed to a concrete solution that the political leadership, the staff.
Your question?
Yes, that's what I'm asking. What is the world-class solution, and why don't we pursue an actual Prince William County solution?
Yeah, let me address that, because I think in my opening remarks I did talk about a world-class solution. I said that Prince William County says we are world-class schools, and then I went on to say that Fairfax, Loudoun, Alexandria counties, and Montgomery counties have 92% college going rates. And what I'm saying is that Prince William County, to be competitive with our neighbors, with those strong neighbors that I called out, needs to have a 92% college going rate. So there's your goal. There's your goal. One metric, that's right. One metric to get right. And that's a 92% college going rate. So that's what I'm talking about.
When I look at world class, I know where we are as a country. And it's one thing to talk about local, but we have to fix this because we're not competitive internationally. You've seen the stats. And I've heard people talk about Finland, and they don't have as many low-income kids. Our kids are not going to be competing in the United States. They're going to be competing in the world. So this world class is something that you just don't throw around. And it has something to do with exactly what you talked about, is the graduation rate, but it's the graduation readiness. And actually, I personally think, and David probably would know it better, but I have been doing some research on what we spend. If we talk about spending, we're still building schools where there are desks in schools where, if you're here, you look at the pods for collaborative learning, and people are moving away from this sit and get and teachers standing in front. You can buy it. I think you can save money by developing an infrastructure with a goal in mind to provide more activities, opportunities for students to be actively engaged, the use of technology, and not have people standing in front of students all day. At Occoquan Elementary, for example, they've gotten rid of all of the desks. I was there today. And in terms of getting kids ready for college, we have a STEM program with Virginia Tech, and all of the fifth graders at Occoquan will be going to Virginia Tech because we need to start really early getting our kids ready. Whether it's 89 or 90, I don't know, but I do think that to the teachers of Prince William County, we need to improve, but I really think the teachers in Prince William County, we've done a pretty good job. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Smith, a retired teacher and former member of the Vocational Advisory Council, Prince William County. About 10 years ago, I suggested 2 years in a row, before I quit because they wouldn't take any action on it, that we should have articulation between Northern Virginia Community College and the local high schools. We could have 200, 300, maybe 400 students a day over here, not people going over there, but coming over here for classes, as my niece did in Florida, where she finished in 3 years. Her father was a construction worker, a single parent. She went on to college and just finished law school. I mean, it really can be done, but you really need to bring the kids over here and to the Manassas campus. We can relieve some of the pressure. Not only helps on the high school level, it doesn't help on the middle and elementary level. That's something we should seriously consider.
Okay, that was a plug for Northern
Okay.
Virginia Community College, but
And this is our final question. Help us go out with a bang.
I will do my best. Andrea Bailey, Potomac Magisterial District. My question is, I applaud you for being here this evening. Thank you so much. My question is, referring back to what Ms. Chapman was discussing earlier, should there be, in order for us to be a world-class area, should there be some type of feasibility study to help to bridge the gap between the funding allocations, to help to understand the demographics and the needs in our county to assist in moving forward better allocation of funds and bridging the gap between the Board of County Supervisors and the school board?
Oh, is that for me or for?
I'm a data person, and so my answer is more information is always better, whether or not it's an issue of understanding or if it's an issue of balancing overall needs. That's something that I can't speak to, and I'm not sure if anyone else can chime in on that. But the changing demographics are, I think there are other organizations that are looking at them, and our center does look at them from time to time. But there is some data out there, and it's digging it out is the question.
one piece of the question that you addressed was funding. And as Ms. Jessie correctly pointed out earlier, there's a relationship between funding and performance, but it's very loosely coupled. You look 25 miles to the north and you have DC schools, highly funded. We don't want DC school performance. I did not call them out in the group of excellence that I talked about. But on the flip side, it's also common sense to understand that dropping funding won't increase school performance either. So no, I get that. There are certain things that we need to look at, though. At what makes for the excellence? What is that goal? I've suggested here tonight that we need to be looking at a 92% college going rate. Why? Because that's statistically significant and makes us competitive. That puts us in the same market as Fairfax, Loudoun, Alexandria, and Montgomery counties. And that is our local competition. And they are also well poised to compete globally as we must do. So the funding is a mechanism to achieve certain goals. And we need to make sure that we have the pieces to help students become successful. And part of that, of course, is safe schools, the right facilities. Well-managed, economically provided, safe schools. But also an important point that I don't want ignored, and that's why I've harped on it a couple of times tonight, is competitive teacher pay. It has to be in the market. We're close. If you look at the statistical significance, and as Ms. Jessie suggested, for some of the veterans, we're actually competitive. But we need to make sure that we have overall competitive teacher pay, and also the right learning assets, the technical solutions to make sure that our children are ready to compete. And by the way, in Prince William County, we are the most diverse of that group that I talked about competing with. So it's a huge challenge.
I just want to talk about something that we have not talked about today. I came over to visit Northern Virginia Community College, and Dr. Hill said something to me that I think I wrote in one of the Old Bridge Observers. I quoted you, and you said that sometimes if you go to college and drop out, you walk away with nothing if you're there for 2 years. But you could go to Northern Virginia Community College and walk away with a certificate. The thing that I have learned, and I love learning, after being on the board, is beginning to look at what we're focusing on. And I did the kindergarten to college with Virginia Tech, and I was there today. I'm a real college advocate. But I think that the area that we're remiss in is looking at the whole career piece for students. And I'm not sure if it's Prince George's County or where they have built a facility that is for career readiness, nursing. And all students don't have to go to a high school a traditional high school. But they've invested their money in a facility where if you want to be a nurse, if you want to be in technology, various careers, cosmetology, it's all within that building. And I think that would reduce some of the students going to our traditional high schools. I think that we need better partnerships. I was at Dumfries Elementary, and Dumfries has a welding project there. And these are students who dropped out, who came back because they're hands-on kind of kids. And I sat through a ceremony where they're going to be able to make $35 an hour as a welder. The average age of a welder is 58. So it's a career that's, up and coming. And I know Mr. Wood's here, and we have a culinary arts school. And see, you could build a building with all of those facilities in one space. And I think we just need to think outside of the box and think about the real world. There are kids, I think that as a school system, every single child should be guaranteed either college or a career. When these kids walk out of here and they're sitting on the streets without jobs, it's an accident waiting to happen. And to the Board of Supervisors, I will say, it's going to cost more to put them in prison than it is to educate them. Thank you.
Well, let me thank our panelists. But before we break up for the evening, I want to, and this is, I'm not asking for, I'm going to have the last word here. But the point that Mrs. Jessie made about the I think it was a PG example, and having, talking about thinking outside of the box. We all tend to have our own silos, and we work in isolation. It's common sense, but we ought to come together and look at how we can share facilities. And sharing facilities doesn't mean that we do it the way we're doing it now. We look at doing it a little bit different and share facilities and talking about saving the taxpayers' money or being better stewards of the taxpayers. I was down at Tidewater Community College, and I thought our building was beautiful, and I saw a building that just made this look like a slum. But the building was located away from the main part of the campus, and found out it's the library building. It's a library building that serves the college and the community. It's and that's smart. Why should the city have its own library and the college have its own library? Bring them together. That's the last piece. Panelists, thank you.
Thank you.
And audience, thanks for being here. And I'd like to, I don't come to too many of these, and this is I think the second time I've had a chance to moderate, but I think we should all make an effort to bring somebody with us. And bring somebody who is not likely to hear what the panelists have to say. And that's how we build a body of good information.
Thank you.
I'll give you that. I just want to thank Dr. Hill for moderating the program and thank the panelists. I also, more importantly, I want to thank Harry Wiggins for taking lead to put this panel together in the first place. I think he did a wonderful job.